This is the You Can Learn Chinese podcast. For everyone who's trying to learn Chinese or reaching for the next level, you came to the right place. I am your host, Jared Turner.
And I just saw 3 people jogging outside, and it inspired me to get up and close the blinds. My co-host is John Pasden. He told me he's trying to let go of perfectionism, but he's not sure if he's doing it right. Let's get to it.
Hey guys, this is Jared Turner joining you here from Utah in the United States.
Hi, everybody. My name is John Pasden. I'm in Shanghai, China, and happy 2026.
2026 indeed. It's here, man. And what a great year it's going to be here in 2026. I'm excited. Got a lot of great things going on.
A new year of Chinese learning.
That's right. And today we are not going to talk about New Year's resolutions.
Nope, did that last year.
That's right. This year, we're going to talk about something that is a perennial question, something people are always asking about or talking about.
Chinese characters, are they worth all the pain?
And the answer is yes.
I thought you were going to say no. Is it no or yes?
I mean, Chinese characters, are they worth all the pain? Yes. But I guess, I'll challenge that assumption about pain. Does it have to be so painful? And is it worth it? That implies that it's hard. And yeah, I would say Chinese characters in comparison are a little bit harder.
Okay, but Jared, we have to draw a distinction here between writing Chinese characters by hand, typing them, and reading them, because that's what we're talking about, actually, these different skills.
Yeah, that's right. So reading and writing of Chinese. Are Chinese characters harder? I mean, yes, and we're going to talk about this today, but specifically, let's talk about that output. We're not necessarily going to be talking about the output in the sense of coming up with, the fluency of that and conceptualizing all that in your head. We're going to talk about the rote, actual mechanical outputting of characters, and there's 2 forms of those.
So you got your handwriting, stroke by stroke, and then you've got your typing, which nowadays is usually by pinyin.
And to guide our discussion today, we are pulling some great points from a paper written by Chengzhi Chu. And he is actually the guy who started Chinese Breeze. They're not exactly sister or competitor, but I would say a good cousin, perhaps, of Mandarin Companion.
Yeah, something like that. It's definitely an important series of graded readers for lots of learners.
Anyway, I met him a number of years ago. I think it's been 8 or 9 years ago at a conference. And anyway, so we stayed in touch. He's a great guy. Have tons of respect for him and for the Chinese Breeze, Chinese Graded Reader series. But anyway, he wrote this paper. He sent it to me recently, and I'm like, hey, this is good stuff.
Yeah, and he's one of the academics that's part of this new wave. You might think that Chinese teachers are all about what's traditional, and they just want to write characters on a chalkboard or something. But actually, there's a growing number of Chinese teachers which are part of this 电写为主, the e-writing primary movement. They don't want to waste all this classroom time writing characters with their students. They want to help students get fluent in Chinese. So that's what this paper is about.
So we're going to talk about this today, and we're going to bring up some great points that he has in this paper talking about, handwriting versus typing. This is a big debate as well among people, among learners. So I think one of the central tenets here is that, Chinese writing has changed more in the last 20 years than in the previous 2000. Now, stop for a second and let that sink in.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was in college and I wrote a paper on Chinese and Japanese characters, at the time, Windows did not support having both Chinese and Japanese characters in one document. This was before the year 2000. And so now, obviously, everything's in Unicode. Everyone's mixing all kinds of, electronic text together. And Chinese is changing. And if the way that we teach Chinese doesn't change, that's kind of insane. Everyone's typing now, not handwriting.
And there's a great way to frame this up, talking about 3 eras of hands of writing. So kind of the first era being the carving era, where they were the oracle bone scripts, bronze inscriptions, these things where they're actually hammering out Chinese characters into stone and bronze and things like that. And then the second era is being the pen writing era, where you got paper and brush and you're able to write that stuff out. And then the third era being the e-writing era, the digital input, with automated character generation. So we're now in that third stage, the e-writing era. We've gone past carving. We could still do pen writing, but e-writing era, that is where we're at.
Okay, so if we're still learning, like smartphones never happened, like we're doing something wrong. It's time to catch up, right? So handwriting Chinese characters is one of the main reasons that Hanzi like feel impossible, because there are a lot of them. You have to learn them to be literate. You have to be able to recognize them. But adding on having to write them correctly, stroke by stroke, it just adds to the burden so much.
So this is one of the reasons why Chinese characters feel harder than it should. And so if you find that Chinese may be too hard and you're also doing a lot of handwriting, that's probably a good indication that handwriting might be really slowing you down.
Yeah, my son right now, he's taking Chinese in school, of course, and he has to do a lot of Chinese homework. Like Chinese is the one subject that gives a lot of homework, and it's all writing. Let me tell you, he hates Chinese class. He hates it.
And this is very true that many learners quit, not just because they hate Chinese, but because they're stuck copying these characters instead of actually using the language. It's a huge amount of effort and investment of time for very little payoff. John, let's be honest, when's the last time you hand wrote a character?
I wrote my wife's name on her Christmas present, but before that, I don't even remember.
There you go. All right. I always say this, like the last time I written characters, I wrote someone's name on a Christmas present because we have a Chinese foreign exchange student. So I wrote his name on there. But aside from that, it's like filling out government forms in China. That's like it.
Yeah, like who knew I was learning to write Chinese characters by hand so that I could put names on Christmas presents, right?
That's right.
So obviously it's inefficient, right? It's inefficient.
Exactly. Massive investment in time, very small payoff.
And like when I think of my son, he's struggling, to do all these assignments where he has to write and write and write. But after he gets through high school, he's just not going to write at all by hand anymore.
So does this sound familiar to anyone listening? If it does, hey, this podcast, this episode, man, you got to stick with this here because this is specifically for you.
All right, so let's take a look. If you want to be literate, if you want to learn Chinese, you want to be fluent in Chinese, but you don't want to do all that handwriting, what does knowing characters actually mean nowadays?
Well, there's kind of 3 points we're going to bring up here. Is that number one, there's recognizing characters when you need them. This is obviously the most fundamental step. You actually know that. And this is the challenge of Chinese. When you come across a character that you don't know, you can't read it. You got nothing, right? Maybe you can decode some maybe ideas what it might be, but that's the challenge of Chinese characters. It's logographic language. You don't know it. You just don't know what it means.
All right. And then number 2 is you're probably going to be using pinyin. So you have to be able to type accurately in pinyin to get the characters.
And that is an important skill. I do know, like sometimes my kids haven't learned pinyin as well in certain things. Like they're trying to type that character over and I'm like, no, this is the pinyin, right?
It's a common mistake, but like learning pinyin well in the beginning is really important. And this is one of the reasons.
And then the third one being choosing the right character when similar ones pop up. And I would say, for example, like sh, right? There's 80 something characters, maybe more.
Actually, E is the worst one.
Oh, that's right.
It's crazy.
But it doesn't matter which one. You can pick any one. There's multiple characters coming up whenever you type it in. And sometimes there's the fuzzy pinyin thing where it'll even pop up some characters that don't have exactly that pinyin, but, or something similar, just in case you had a typo.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how writing Chinese has turned into like multiple choice questions. Which is the correct character? Like over and over and over. But, that's what you got to do.
So 3 points there, essentially. What is knowing characters? Means recognizing the characters when you need them. 2, typing characters accurately. And 3rd, choosing the right character when similar ones pop up. So that's really what we're talking about when, hey, do you know Chinese or can you read Chinese?
Right. So that doesn't mean you have to know stroke order perfectly, get all those strokes exactly right. It doesn't mean that you have to be able to just cold write any character that you've ever studied or that you're supposed to know. Those are not skills that you actually really need.
Exactly. And also not necessarily having the perfect stroke order is not in that list. Stroke order is important. There's an order when you write in English, and that's kind of optimized.
Okay, so important to this is that typing is not cheating. Typing is how you use Chinese now to write. And typing was never cheating. Like I said, once my son gets through high school, he's not going to write by hand. Adults don't write by hand very much. They type. Educated people use computers, they use phones, they type, and no one thinks they're bad at Chinese because of that.
That's such a good point there. And I think about that. I've heard from people, oh, yeah, typing, it's not really learning the characters. Is it?
It's like some people feel like, well, if you don't go through years and years of excruciating, handwriting characters, then you haven't earned the right to type or something like that. But come on.
Yeah. I think some of that's just kind of the survivor bias. It's the thing of like, that's what I went through. That's how I learned Chinese.
Survivor gatekeeping, right?
That's right. So you need to do it too. And so that leads on to the myth of muscle memory. Okay, so this is a very important point, and this is brought up by Chu Laoshi in his paper here. He says that handwriting, yes, it creates a stronger memory in that respect. So, but let's think about this. So would carving characters into bone with a knife, would that provide a better muscle memory?
I think it would.
It just might. But we got to think about that. Does that mean, though, it's a good use of your time? Because there's that concept of like, oh, if it's hard, then it's maybe good for my learning. But what we really need to do here is that there's a bit of a misalignment here between these traditional methods and our modern learning conditions. So just because it's hard or it takes more time doesn't mean it's an efficient use of your time.
Right. It should not be a suffering contest.
Correct. And efficiency matters more than tradition, especially for us adult learners. You can spend easily 50% of your Chinese learning time just handwriting characters. If we want to extend that into carving it into bone with a knife, well, we could do 90% of our time. But every minute or hour you're spent doing that means you're not doing other things, which could be a lot more effective and efficient for your Chinese learning.
And don't forget also that typing is actually helping your Chinese. Because to type, you have to know the pronunciation of the characters, and then you have to be able to recognize and select those characters. And you can do that a lot faster and get through a lot more characters and thus a lot more practice than you can by writing, stroke by stroke. So, typing actually helps you learn Chinese faster if you start typing sooner instead of spending tons of time on handwriting.
And that's a really good point because as part of that language acquisition process is generating output. So we just talk about, hey, you want to speak, but typing obviously is, the writing aspect of it. And that being able to put and formulate those ideas and those characters in your head is important. But if you would think about it, that mental output process is very important. But if you're only focusing on handwriting, it becomes a bottleneck. You can think much faster. I would even argue at a very low level, you can be able to think in Chinese much faster than you'd ever be able to handwrite. And so if we take away that handwriting bottleneck and we replace it with typing, you're going to be able to output something a lot faster that's going to be at least more fluid with the speed of thought at a lower level. We can always think faster than we can type or write. But if we think about it conceptually in that point of view, it's important to realize that. But there are people who say, hey, what if we don't learn to handwrite? We are going to miss out on all these cultural aspects, and handwriting characters is a beautiful art and everything. And yes, it is. I don't think that we need to say, hey, handwriting has no place and we should just forget about it. That's not what we're saying. So what are we saying, John?
All right. Well, first of all, communication doesn't need handwriting to happen. And most of us are learning Chinese for communication. So there's that. But, also, if you like calligraphy, then you like calligraphy and you can learn to handwrite. No one's going to stop you. But like when I work with learners at All Set Learning, if we have a total beginner, one thing that I like to do is to not even really learn characters for a while. Like let people get used to the sounds of the language, have a little fun communicating, and then come to characters when they feel more comfortable with pinyin because it's a lot all at once. And then what you could also do is maybe dabble in handwriting like a bit later after you're feeling a bit more comfortable with, the way characters look and the structure. But there's no reason that you have to do it all at once.
Yeah. And I think one way to frame this up is that, handwriting, it can be a hobby. but literacy is a skill. And so you don't have to learn calligraphy to be able to write Chinese. You don't have to handwrite things to culturally appreciate the language or appreciate the culture, right? And so that whole aspect, the handwriting can be a different aspect. It can be a hobby, so to speak. And some people really enjoy it. And that's totally fine. But it could be like, painting. You can appreciate works of art. In fact, you could take a painting class, you can learn about it, and maybe you could paint something that's not great, but you could paint for fun. But there are some people who they dive into that as a profession, and that's great. But that's not necessarily means that everybody has to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen posts on Reddit by learners who are filling notebooks with their Chinese writing, and they seem to derive a lot of satisfaction from it, either because they've written so much, because they've learned how to write so many characters, or maybe because they just like the way it looks and they like the way they can see their characters becoming more and more standard looking. But it's not always going to have a positive effect on your motivation. So, writing characters, if you don't want to do it and you're being forced to do it, that can affect your motivation.
Absolutely. And that's an important point to think about. Hey, if you are finding out that you are focusing on handwriting characters, okay, that once again, like I say, that is okay. But if it is having a detrimental impact on your motivation, it's something you may want to, I would really encourage you to reevaluate that right away. And if that is you, then I would encourage you to adjust. Focus on more of these modern methods that reduce your frustration. They'll increase your momentum. Focus more on the typing aspect. But if this is going to be the millstone around your neck that sinks your Chinese learning, then do not make this a huge part of your Chinese learning.
Okay, so remember, we are saying that you should read. Reading is a part of Chinese. We're not saying get rid of characters altogether. You need to read characters, yes. And reading a lot is going to help you with, recognition and eventually with output of characters by typing. And one of the great things about typing is, you're producing electronic text. You can put that on social media, you can share it with friends, maybe you're using WeChat, emails, whatever. And that's pretty powerful in itself. So the more you type, the more you're forcing yourself to choose the correct characters. And so, you're reading, you're seeing the correct characters in context, but then when you're typing, you're choosing them, and it's a good reinforcement loop. So you shouldn't be just copying characters endlessly unless for some reason you love it. And if you do, that's cool. And you really don't have to obsess over stroke order early on. If you decide that you really do want to get better at handwriting, that's cool, and you should definitely pay attention to stroke order. But it's not something that you have to be doing right in the beginning or even in the first year.
So if we think about it this way, handwriting, like I said, I think it's good to learn. You need to understand the basics of this, but it should not be a core central tenet and practice for your Chinese learning, unless it is something that you find very motivating and very enriching to what you're doing. If you find it to be a drain and a strain on you, put it aside. And maybe you come back to it later if it's something you enjoy. But do not make it something that, the endless copying of characters, obsessing over the stroke order, or just, I've got to learn this next character. Because once again, just think about it. Hey, if you were to carve this and stuff into stone, is that now going to help you better? And I imagine, John, back in the day when they moved from carving into stone to writing with pen and paper, there were probably some of those guys back then were saying, that's not how you really write Chinese characters.
All right. And we also want to remind everybody that these are not just the recommendations of John and Jared. We're looking at this paper from Chu Laoshi, this academic paper, and there is a growing movement of teachers. And basically their message is, if your Hanzi pedagogy is still handwriting first, you are optimizing for tradition, not for learners. And, there are tons of great Chinese teachers that really want to help you guys as learners. And this is something that's becoming a very important issue for learning Chinese.
And I am glad to see this, John, being implemented more and more in educational systems I've been able to interact with. Specifically, my kids are in a Chinese language dual immersion program, and they all have laptops now. That's not unique to our school or anything, but they specifically are like typing everything, especially in early grades. So this is catching on globally, and it's not going away, right? It's not just the future, it is the now.
Oh, I also wanted to mention that Professor Matt Koss, who we've had on the show quite a while ago, is also one of the people in this new movement. He wrote a paper called Transforming Hanzi Pedagogy in the Digital Age, Theory, Research, and Practice. He wrote a book. I have a small excerpt in that book. And he also wrote the foreword for my book, which is called Learn Chinese Characters by Reading, which was released last year. So if you're a beginner and you're convinced that learning Chinese characters by reading makes sense for you, then check out this book, Learn Chinese Characters by Reading. And it covers 200 basic characters, which, by the way, will get you right into reading Mandarin Companion graded readers.
That's awesome. Matt Koss, he's awesome. I love that guy. We should get him back on the podcast sometime here.
Yeah, we should.
So to kind of wrap this up, pulling from this paper again, Chu Laoshi, he says the e-writing pen secondary model, essentially it is 1, historically justified, 2, pedagogically efficient, 3, psychologically humane, and 4th, culturally compatible. So don't be that guy saying, you gotta learn to handwrite. That's the only way to do it, because, hey, there are more efficient ways. And we're not saying don't do the handwriting. It's just like, hey, do not let it be that anchor around your neck, crushing all motivation for Chinese learning.
Yeah, the kids these days do not need to walk 20 miles uphill both ways in the snow like you did.
Did you really have to do that, John?
Only 10 miles.
I think when your kids, our grandkids are going to be saying, I had to ride an electric bike uphill both ways to school.
No, our kids are going to be saying, when I was your age, I couldn't let AI write everything.
I actually had to produce my own original content.
Like for me, my kids can't believe that in my childhood there was no internet. And for their children, they're not going to believe that in their parents' childhood there was no AI.
That's right. And who knows what their children's going to be like.
Who knows?
We actually had to chew when I was your age.
Thanks for listening to the You Can Learn Chinese podcast, the podcast that helps you learn Chinese without having to carve characters into bone. I'm Jared Turner, co-founder of Mandarin Campaign, alongside my co-host John Paston, the man responsible for more Chinese resources than most textbooks combined. He's co-founder of Mandarin Campaign, founder of All Set Learning, the Chinese Grammar Wiki, and Sinosplice.com. If you like today's episode, hit that subscribe button and share with someone who's learning Chinese. It helps more people find the show. Got a second? Leave us a review on iTunes. We seriously love hearing from our listeners. Connect with us at mandarincompanion.com on social media, where we post the occasional Chinese meme. And hey, if you want to read Chinese that doesn't make you cry, check out our Mandarin Companion graded readers. You can find them wherever books are sold. Apologies to John Cena, we just ran out of time. The You Can Learn Chinese podcast is produced by me, Jared Turner, and is edited by Jasper Chua. And of course, thanks to my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, John Paston. See you next time.